Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the MMA Corner Predictions. Oh, I'm sorry, the MMA Corner News Show. We're not predicting events. We're actually going to be recapping a whole bunch of nonsense related to an event. So, again, the MMA Corner News Show. This episode is brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power. Battle Bomb. Definitely check them out, battlebomb.com. DraftKings, go to themmacorner.com, click on the DraftKings link. Sign up, enjoy fantasy, anything for that matter. But these days, since football season's over, unfortunately, I'm doing fantasy MMA. Definitely love it. Go to DraftKings, check it out. Also, shows brought to you by MMA Overload as well as NFL.com. All right, I'm your host, Josh Davis, alongside this knucklehead, my co-host, Jason Shelkey. I don't even know what that was, but anyways, a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on right now, unless you've been living under a rock. Some big news has recently broke, and that's the fact that Anderson Silva failed at least one drug test, if not multiple drug tests for anabolic steroids leading up to UFC 183. And poor Nick Diaz has failed yet another post-fight drug test for marijuana metabolites following UFC 183. In addition to that, there's some other news going on, but we'll start with those big stories and see where we go. Before I jump into it, Jason, give us your thoughts. Let's start with Nick Diaz first.
With
okay?
Nick Diaz? Okay.
Yeah, let's start with Nick Diaz first, and then we'll go into Anderson Silva. Nick Diaz, tested positive for marijuana a third time. The Nevada State Athletic Commission is reporting that he was over twice the allotted limit of 150 nanograms. He was at 300. I don't know. Like I said, before I go off on this, Jason, tell us what you think.
Well, first off, I'm glad to see you're off suicide watch after the Super Bowl, Josh, and that you're still here with us. I'm very happy about that. Now, with Nick Diaz, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he keeps on getting all these suspensions and fines for a medicine that he has every legal right to take. He is prescribed for him in his home state. He takes it for, he is prescribed it by a licensed medical professional, and he uses it for whatever medical conditions his doctor issues it to him for. Now, you and I talked about this earlier, and whenever you're competing in athletic activity, and you start to sweat, and well, I'll leave that alone because you can better describe it than I can. But whenever you're in athletic activity, that can artificially boost the amount of THC or marijuana metabolites that are actually in your system. But for them to be coming down so hard on pot, I mean, Matt Riddle gone because of pot. Nick Diaz, third time, he's probably going to be gone because of pot. And yet you have these guys that are on steroids that are still around. What the actual F's going on here? It makes zero sense. The only way marijuana would be a performance-enhancing drug was if Anderson Silva was a Hershey's chocolate bar. Only way it's a performance-enhancing, or bowl of Cocoa Puffs, okay? Only way it's a performance-enhancing drug. I think it's the stupidest rule in MMA right now, or stupid. I don't want to say in MMA, the stupidest rule issued by the state athletic commissions, at least in Nevada. I can't speak for any other states, but stupidest rule in Nevada.
Well, a couple of things. First off, it's not as much as I don't like the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Well, I can't say I don't like them. As much as I don't always agree with their decision-making process, the Nevada State Athletic Commission actually is not to blame here. It's WADA. It's the World Anti-Doping Agency that is to blame. They're the ones who actually have marijuana on their banned substance list. That is the list that NSAC abides by. And so because it's banned there, it's banned by pretty much every commission. Now, Nevada, on the small plus side, they have been pro marijuana. Actually, they've raised their cutoff, their limits from, I believe they were at 25 to now 150. But the problem is when people who are known marijuana users get tested, they're at a significant disadvantage. First off, marijuana is natural, well, not marijuana, THC, which is what the marijuana metabolite that they're testing for is naturally in your system. Your body naturally produces it. When you have an overload of that THC, that's what gives you the effects of being high. An everyday THC user, they store that stuff in their fat cells like everybody else, but again, because they're doing it so long, it stores up deep, deep, deep in their fat cells. It also stores in their bladder. Now, when you go out and have a 5-round fight against a guy like Anderson Silva, you're exerting a lot of energy. You're sweating, you're burning fat, you're releasing all of this THC back into your system. Your body's breaking it down, sending it right back into your urine, trying to get it out. So when you go and take a urine test immediately following a fight, you're going to have elevated levels of THC in your system because you just sweated, burned all those fat cells, released it all back into your body. That's why there is a natural cutoff limit. Now, again, someone who doesn't smoke any marijuana, they don't have this problem because they never have the excess in their system that they're sweating out. But we know in Nick Diaz's off time, he is a marijuana user. Like you said, he's prescribed it in the state that he lives in. He uses it for anxiety, all kinds of reasons. But that's neither here nor there. You know what that's covered under? HIPAA. And so it shouldn't even be an issue regardless. So I don't know. I hope Nick Diaz doesn't get banned. I am a little concerned that Nevada might ban him because it is 3 strikes against him. But again, when you look at it, you have guys who are truly known cheaters, known juice heads, as Chris Weidman likes to say it, guys that have routinely tested positive for steroids, for testosterone, for true performance enhancing drugs. Hell, for cocaine. You know, that is a performance enhancing drug. That's going to get you geeked up. That's going to get you energetic. That's going to get you going. Smoke a little doob, you're going to be laid back. And I'll be honest, if a fighter smokes some marijuana before they go out and step in the cage, they deserve the ass whooping that they're going to get. Their reflexes are going to be slower. Their reaction time is going to be slower. They're not going to have what it takes to compete at that level. And so if there's a fighter out there doing that, let them, because they're going to get their ass whooped for it. And I think that's what we call natural justice. So again, I hope Diaz isn't getting suspended for life, but we'll see. Back to you, Shelky.
Yeah, if he gets suspended for life, I think that would just be so. I mean, look at someone like Chael Sonnen. He wasn't banned for life, and how many times has he tested positive for human growth hormones and TRT and Vitor Belfort, Josh Barnett. I mean, I could sit here and list names over and over and over again of people that have taken stuff to give them a competitive advantage, yet they were still allowed to compete after whatever suspension they were offered up by the commission. So, and to go on your point, if Nick Diaz was really stoned in his fight against Anderson Silva, he deserves like an award, a medal, something. They should be honoring him at the World MMA Awards for greatest lifetime performance. Because if he was truly that doped up whenever he was fighting the alleged best fighter in the world, You know, he deserves something. But I can already tell just from the vibes I got from the two statements the UFC released regarding both the failed drug test that it's going to be Nick Diaz. Unfortunately, it's going to get thrown underneath the bus. And there's, for those of you that went on the MMA Corner and read the two different issues or statements that were issued by the UFC, you could tell there was a complete different tone between the one that was sent about Anderson Silva and the one that was sent about Nick Diaz. And so I have a feeling that Diaz is really going to get hammered as much as I don't think he deserves it.
You know, I don't think he deserves it either. And here's the thing. Um, Nick had to take a drug test, I believe. Uh, he took it on January 28th, maybe even it was the 29th. The first day that he arrived in Vegas, he had to take a drug test. Uh, he had to do that because it was a part of his license requirement to fight in the state of Nevada. He still had not supplied a clean urine sample from his suspension. So in order for him to get cleared to fight uh, at UFC 183, he had to supply a clean urine sample, which he did. So that leads me to come to two conclusions. Either he smoked pot before he went and fought Anderson, which, judging by his performance, I don't think that he did, or it goes back to, again, an everyday user is going to burn off that additional THC and it's going to elevate their levels. I propose this, and it's, again, just from some idiot with a website and a TV show and a radio show and everything else. Take his second urine sample. So what I mean by that is when he gets back and starts pounding some water to replenish those fluids and whatnot, let him go urinate first. All right, let him wash all that excess stuff out. Then let him replenish again. And it might take the commission an additional half hour or whatever, but they're there all night anyway, so it doesn't matter. Then when he has to go to the bathroom the second time, take that sample. I think you'll get a more accurate reading to what is truly in his system at that point. But again, just my thoughts, and like I said, I'm just some idiot. But moving on, and again, I want to wish Nick the very best. I hope he does not get banned. I do hope we see him back in the UFC. I'm a Nick and Nate Diaz supporter. I love those guys. I'm not going to say Nick's the best MMA guy in the world. He's not. Anderson Silva is by far the greatest MMA fighter the world has ever seen. Nick Diaz is one of, if not the greatest pure fighter that the UFC has ever seen, hands down. The guy comes to fight, doesn't come to win on points. If he gets knocked out, it is what it is. But he comes to fight, win or lose every time. Very few guys do that. So I hope we see him back. Now, like I said, moving on. Whew. Anderson Silva, the GOAT, the greatest of all times, testing positive for anabolic steroids. Now, he released a statement, and the UFC has released a statement, and we'll get into those later on. But Shelky, just right off the bat, Anderson Silva testing positive for steroids. What are your thoughts on that? The greatest of all time. Steroids. Hold on. The same man who just as most recently as October, I think it was, went on record as saying, you use steroids one time, that basically means that you've done it your entire, or you fail a test for steroids one time, that basically means you've done it your entire fighting career and you should be banned from the sport.
Yeah, I saw that on one of the many things on Twitter last night that the huge uproar that started that lasted for about 5 hours after this news was released. The only thing Fedor ever tested positive for was ice cream. Randy Couture never tested positive for anything. Chuck Liddell never tested positive for anything. there were some arguments on Twitter that he was on steroids because he was still recuperating from having his leg operation. If you still have anabolic steroids in your system 19 days before a fight because you're rehabbing an injury that happened 13 months ago, number one, you shouldn't be allowed to fight. Number two, if you think that, you're an idiot. I'm saying that right now. You are an idiot. Now, not something else to take into consideration is this is the third Black House fighter that has failed a steroid test for the exact same metabolite that was in Anderson's system. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I will butcher the hell out of it. And so, for people to think that this is, not real or this is some mistake or something else, if it wouldn't be so bad if two other fighters from Black House Gym had tested positive for it, and B, if Anderson Silva and his people at Soares had not turned down the opportunity to have the B sample tested. Because I saw a report about that today. I read it, I think it was on MMA Weekly, that they had not consented to have this B sample tested. Because I think if they know if they do the B sample and it comes back the same result, it's going to be even more damning than this one. So, and as a fan of the sport, I'm really disappointed because I was one of the ones that thought that Anderson Silva was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, mixed martial artists so far in the sport's history. But with this, I mean, you got to put an asterisk by it like you did with Barry Bonds, It's because you really don't know if it happened before. And for it to happen now, it's a complete shame. It really is.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to judge Anderson on anything previous of this, on the simple fact that we know he's been tested numerous times before, and this is the first one that he's failed. So, what I will do is judge everything from this moment moving forward, absolutely, because we know he's tested positive. Now, as far as the B sample goes, according to his statement and the stuff I get outside of his camp is, yeah, they are going to request that the B sample be done. And I don't know if they're going to fly his doctor out from Brazil so he can watch the testing be done, or what they're planning on doing. But it does sound like they are going to have that done. So we'll just have to wait and see. He, came out and said that he's never used any kind of performance-enhancing drugs, and he stands by the fact that he's an ambassador for a clean sport. So I don't know. It is what it is. Here are the issues that I have with this, and they're pretty significant. If you're going to be doing out of competition testing, doesn't it make sense to have the results in before said competition? Otherwise, what's the point? Because truly, I got to be honest. I don't care what someone's doing 4 months before they're fighting. I don't care if they're juicing up in the gym or whatever, if they're rolling dubs on the frickin' slopes. I don't care. It's out of competition. What I care about is from the time they sign that bout agreement to the time that they compete. So if you're going to do a drug test on, let's say, January 19th for a bout that's scheduled for, January 31st, wouldn't it make sense to have the results in before that? I mean, it's just a thought. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but, to me, that is what makes sense. So again, if you have someone who's on a performance-enhancing drug, you can do something. Because if what you're trying to do is clean up the sport, fighter safety and all of that kind of stuff, then why would you wait until after the guy's competed? Why would you wait until after the risk has already been done? That doesn't make any sense to me. To me, what's the point of doing the test if you're not going to have the results beforehand to stop something bad from happening? Now, I'm not a conspiracy guy or anything like that. However, I will just lay down some facts. When Chael Sonnen tested positive before whatever UFC, when he was supposed to fight Vanderlei, it didn't take him this long to get those results back. They had them back pretty quick, and Chael was done. It's just one of those things. I don't understand why it took so long to get the results back for John Jones, why it took so long to get them back for Anderson Silva, but in other cases it hasn't. Give me your thoughts.
Well, you bring up two good points. That it took a lot longer than it should have to get those results back. But I want to take a little trip in the MMA time machine back to around 2008, 2009, whenever, or was it 2007? Somewhere in there when Josh Barnett was supposed to fight a gentleman named Fedor Emelianenko for this little promotion called Affliction that was holding their third show. And they did a drug test on Josh Barnett before the fight, and he tested positive for anabolic steroids, which led to the end of Affliction MMA. Now, if they were able to get those tests back that quick enough to completely shut down a promotion, why is it taking this long for UFC results to come back whenever we know that they are, well, number one, the Fertitta brothers, they're deep in Las Vegas. They own all the station casinos. They have a lot of pull there, along with the UFC, because they bring in hundreds of millions of dollars into the Las Vegas economy. Because think about this. If John Jones and Anderson Silva had been pulled for their cards, there'd be a whole bunch of open hotel rooms. There'd be a whole bunch of restaurants not getting revenue. There'd be a whole bunch of lost gambling revenue, drink revenue, transportation revenue, a whole lot of revenue taken out of the state of Nevada, on top of a whole lot of revenue taken out of the pockets of Silva INC. So, while I'm not going to play MMA's conspiracy theorist either, because I left my tin hat in the other room, it does seem kind of odd that if you're a no-name, you're a nobody, and you test positive, you know right away. If you're the GOAT and the second greatest GOAT, you don't know until after the competition ends. So that's where I have the issue, because it's actually the UFC that started pushing for out-of-competition testing. And now that they got it, look where it's happened. Look what's happening. And why are they doing it if it's not even having an effect on the fighters that are testing positive out of competition, before competition? It's completely pointless. If you're going to do it, you need the results back before the event, damn it. It's a completely flawed system if this is the way it truly works, or if this so happened to be two flukes in a row, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I don't. It's hard to say. It really is. And because I'm not a part of the commission and I'm not on the inner circle, it truly is hard to judge what goes on. However, I'm not an idiot. I wasn't born yesterday. I have stayed at a Holiday Inn several times in my life. From the outside looking in, it just, I don't know. It seems a little fishy. And I will say this. I'm not going to UFC bash or anything like that. I love the UFC. I love MMA. I love all that kind of stuff. But if something isn't done somewhere along the lines, uh, essentially, I don't know, the UFC is going to ruin their brand. They are going to taint their brand as being nothing but, steroid promoting, whatever. And I do know that that's not something that Dana White wants, but I also know that if you banned every fighter that tested positive for steroids, you'd be without some marquee fighters. Think about that. Every fighter who's ever tested positive for steroids, they all got, or a performance enhancing drug, they all got banned from the sport. Think about the names that we wouldn't have. We wouldn't have Vitor Belfort. We wouldn't have Josh Barnett. We wouldn't have Royce Gracie, for that matter. We'd no longer have Anderson Silva, guys like Nate Marquardt, Dennis Seaver, and these are just a few. I mean, that's just 6, but there's literally tons. And not that I ever want to give my colleagues, and that's really what they are, credit for their work. I will say this. I believe it was MMA Junkie who had a pretty good article on their site today about 31%, 31% of the fighters tested in out of competition testing have failed for a banned substance, either a performance enhancing substance or a drug of abuse. 31%. Almost 1/3 of the fighters tested. So think about that. All right. If you just had to scrap 1/3 of the UFC roster right now, while the company could still go on and all of that kind of stuff, you are going to take a significant hit because who knows? It could be a guy like Conor McGregor who has a huge following. And if he's banned and you no longer have that following, spending money on your brand, it's going to hurt. And so, they're certainly in a catch-22. I know Dana White wants to keep the sport clean, but I also know he's not a dummy. He's a smart guy just like I am, and he knows that you cannot control fighters. And in a sport, in a profession where your paycheck is dependent on how well you perform, and there's certain substances out there that are going to allow you to perform better, people are going to put that into their body, whether it's legal, illegal, doesn't matter. People out there are going to do that because that's what human beings do. We make bad decisions every day. So, again, though, circling back, I don't know what goes on inside the commission, so I'm not going to blast them. But I will say from the outside looking in, they look pretty bad right now. They really do, and so does the UFC. Everybody involved in this looks pretty bad, and so they're going to have to get it cleaned up. And I do love Chael P. Sonnen. He's the man. Like he has come out and said, Anderson, if you did it, just admit it. People will forgive you, but if you lie about it, they'll remember that stuff forever. Human beings, we don't forget liars, but people that admit it, okay. No one cares that Jason Giambi did steroids. You know why? Because he came out and said, yeah, I cheated. I wanted a competitive edge. And I will be honest, most people outside of baseball won't even remember that he did steroids. But they will remember a man who never once tested positive has been accused by the entire world of doing steroids, and that's Barry Bonds. So, yeah, I'll have to agree with Chael. If you did it, admit it, and let's move on. Shelby.
Yeah, I mean, the human memory, if I remember correctly, will store more negative information than positive information. It's like we're hardwired as human beings to remember bad things so that way we avoid them in the future. Um, I think that would go back to our primal instincts. Hey, if a lion bit you, don't go near the lion again. But you nailed it on the head. If he did it, just say, you know what, you know, whatever, blah blah blah. Insert reason here. Yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. I screwed up. I shame myself. I shame the UFC. Blah 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 blah. And in a couple of weeks, it would all blow over. No one would give a shit. But if you make a big circus out of it, and it comes out that you are a cheater, people are going to remember that. And on that note, um, I know that Anderson was in Las Vegas filming Tough Brazil 4. The UFC was supposed to release a statement within 24 to 48 hours regarding if he was still going to be a participant on that. Have you heard anything?
Oh, I apologize. I thought we already posted that on the site. Fans, yeah, this speaks volumes. If you really want to know what the UFC thinks of Anderson Silva's failed drug test, listen to this. Absolutely, he is still coaching Tough Brazil 4. Absolutely. No question. And he's still got his $800,000. However, he might have to give $200,000 back if his victory is overturned to a no contest. He'll have to give up that win bonus. But uh, here's what Nevada thinks of anything to Anderson Silva just yet. They're going to discuss it at the February 17th hearing, but Anderson's not scheduled to be there. He hasn't been asked to be there, anything like that. So uh, I don't know.
You're kidding me, right? That this is all a bunch of lies. There's no way that
Yeah.
he's still on the show. He doesn't have to be at the same commission meeting that Nick Diaz has to be at for smoking some pot.
When you're the goat, you're the goat, man. That's just how you roll.
It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
you're the GOAT, you still got to play by the same damn rules as everybody else. But from everything that's
Do
developed over the
you?
past month, it doesn't appear like you do. It's like the bigger the name, the more money you make, the more shit you can get by with. Sorry for my language, but I'm fired up.
If, let's say, oh, Ian McCall, for instance, Uncle Creepy, tested positive for cocaine following UFC 183,
He'd be gone.
he would be. He would be.
Or even if he tested positive for it beforehand, if he was one of the people that get tested, they would have yanked him right out of that fight. Gave John Lineker a bunch of money. Say sorry, Ian McCall, get the hell out of here. Sorry to interject there, Josh.
No, that's exactly where I was going with it. So, uh, in every sport, there are different rules for different people. Now, the NFL, for instance, is trying to change that and just be, out of control on anybody that breaks the law or, violates code of conduct, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say that the UFC should adopt that policy, but I will say this. The UFC should take that process out of the commission, should take it away from each state commission. I understand that the state commissions are always going to do their own thing because they control licensing. But again, the UFC should start uh, handing out those punishments, just like they do with out of country stuff, where they go to like Brazil that doesn't have a commission to monitor any of that stuff. Just make it unified. Here's the deal: if you fail a drug test for a banned substance, and the UFC could come up with their own banned substance, we are going to suspend you for a year. Second time, 2 years. Third time, you are banned from the company. just like, the NFL does. They could easily do something like that. Um, I don't know. Uh,
In the fight game, that's the fine line that you walk because of, well, in mixed martial arts, that's a fine line you walk because of the direct relation between the promoter and the organization and the sanctioning body, which in the UFC's case, they are their sanctioning body and they are the promoter because they have contractual rights over the fighters that are fighting for their championship belt. It's not like in boxing where you have a promoter and they're promoting their fighter to fight for the WBC title or the IBF title, right? If a
right,
fighter fails a drug test, those individual sanctioning bodies can levy whatever fines they want on that specific fighter.
exactly.
But we don't have that in MMA because there are no rules in set to to separate promotion or sanctioning body and promoter like there are in boxing.
There needs to be some kind of unification, some kind of uniformity, whatever you want to call it, uh, or there's never going to be uh, an end. You can go to any Indian casino, okay, and throw an event with any fighter that you want. There is no jurisdiction there, and that's unacceptable. You can have these guys high on cocaine, whatever, doing steroids, it doesn't matter. Then think about all these lower level events, like that aren't the UFC, where these fighters are competing on God knows what, because no one's testing them. They're not getting tested. These little rinky-dink promotions, the commissions aren't testing these guys. They're not wasting the money on it. They don't care. But when the UFC comes to town, that's the big boys. They do care. And some commissions don't care when Bellator comes to town. Not all those guys are getting tested.
I was just gonna bring up Bellator because when Bjorn Rebney was in charge, I like him as I like Bjorn, awesome guy, but they were holding so many events, reservations. And with those guys fighting as much as they were in that tournament style, there has to be a reason why they're holding so many events at Indian reservations in Oklahoma and Arizona, Missouri, or any other state that has very soft athletic commissions.
Oh, it was because it was easy to get those venues. They were cheap and they were always available.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I just look at facts, and the facts tell me that the sport that we love is dirty. We all know that. It is dirty. You could go into pretty much any gym in America, whether it's Black House, whether it's Jackson's, it doesn't matter. I guarantee you there is somebody in that gym who is on something. It's the sport we live. It's the sport we love. It's the sport we live with. It is there. Now, I will say this, and I've said this 100 times. Either do everything it takes to completely clean up the sport, or do something to make that stuff legal and a level playing field for everybody. It's that simple.
Can't pick and choose who you want to play by the rules and who gets a hall pass.
Well, you can, but it's not
You're not
fair.
supposed to. Yeah.
I mean,
We
and
know it obviously it's happening because
we're watching it happen. And
exactly, we can see it happening.
I get it. It's, life's not fair, this, that, and the other. But uh, if the UFC doesn't want to ruin their brand, they are they're the pioneers. They're the leaders. All right, what they do, everybody else will follow suit. And so it really is up to them to clean it up. And if they don't, they're going to be the ones that ruin their brand. And I don't know. They're obviously established as a brand, but again, if guys like Anderson continue to test positive. I mean, I was talking to my brother about this earlier today. I told him, look, dude, if GSP came back and tested positive, the sport would be ruined. You know, because then you have pretty much anyone that you could say was the greatest of all times, the pound for pound kings, have all tested positive for something.
Except for
John Jones, except for who?
Fedor.
Yes, but he's the exclusion. He's the non-UFC fighter we're talking about here.
Okay, we're talking about GOAT inside the UFC.
And
Gotcha.
I have to be honest. I don't know what kind of drug tests ever went on over in Prague in Japan. I
According
never.
to Don Fry, none.
That's always what I've been told. And so who knows what he was doing while he was in Prague. All right, and then coming over to Strikeforce, I know there was the stuff with Affliction. We know Josh Barnett was tested. But the one thing, if you really go back and look at all that hubbub, no one ever said that Fedor was even tested. So we don't know. We know Josh Barnett failed the test. Was he the only one tested? I don't know. No one's ever actually let that be known. So I'm not saying that Fedor ever did anything, because I don't think that he did, but I'm not going to include him in this conversation, because I do know the drug testing that he went through throughout his career is not the same as what's going on right now.
Valid point.
And so I will use the guys that are current. And again, I don't want to throw any false accusations out there, but there's always been speculation about Jose Aldo. Again, there's been speculation about Chad Mendez. Who knows what's going on? But I will say this: the fighters that train with each other, the fighters that fight each other, the fighters that do this all the time, when they make those inside comments about somebody doing something, they're probably on to something, because again, they're the ones with the insider knowledge.
Jose Canseco wrote the book saying he stuck a needle in Mark McGuire's ass.
And he did. All right, Shelky, final thoughts. Wrap it up.
Final thoughts, man. I mean, this whole past month, failed, John Jones testing positive for cocaine. John Jones or Anderson Silva for steroids. Nick Diaz for weed, big deal. But then you have these, all these fighters getting injured, fighters missing weight. January was not a good month for the sport of mixed martial arts in the public eye whatsoever. I've been covering this sport for about 7 years, and I cannot remember so many bad events happening in such a short time span. It's, and especially when within the UFC, who most people associate MMA with UFC, like Kleenex, not tissue. UFC is MMA. And so for all this stuff to be happening within the UFC, I just say it's just damning for the rest of the sport in the casual fan's eyes, in my opinion, because they see this stuff going on and they assume it's going on everywhere else, because to them MMA is UFC. And so, for 2000, it's not been a good year so far. First month of 2015 has been horrible for the sport. And I just hope, for the sake of the sport, the fans, everybody in it, we don't get any repeats of January this month, this year, the rest of history. As long as this sport's about. Even though we will, I hope we don't.
I just hope that January isn't a sign to things to come for what 2015 has to hold. But, it's not been good so far when you think about everything that's happened. And then we have Weidman pulling out, Vitor turning down all kinds of interim title shots. Who knows what 2015 is going to hold. But January was not a good start. I will end it on this. If you truly want to know where the world of MMA stands right now, New York State is going to legalize marijuana before they legalize MMA. This year, 2015, the state of New York will be legalizing marijuana and not MMA. That is what the state of affairs are for the world of MMA right now. With that being said, this was the MMA Corner News Show. I'd like to thank all our sponsors, BattleBomb, NFL.com, MMA Overload, DraftKings. Real quickly, not a sponsor. I do want to give a shout out. Almost forgot, which is terrible. All you gamers out there, we have unleashed a new site. And shit, since I didn't do anything, I'll give it to the man who did. Ended on this. I'm Josh Davis. I'll let Shelky run it from here. TheMMAcorner.com, your home for all things MMA.
And to complement all things MMA, we now have TMC Esports, which covers everything esports and gaming related. So for all your League of Legends news, video game news, any other games, Smite, Infinity Crisis, go there and check us out on Twitch, twitchtv.com/TMC_esports.
There you have it, everybody. And for all you World of Warcraft people, don't forget them. I know that's huge. All right. He's Jason Shelky. I'm Josh Davis. We're out.